Have you ever set a goal in a game only to be sidetracked by every other thing? Well, that's the story of my life, and Palworld was no different. I set out to defeat all the bosses in 100 days, but because this game is so great, I got sidetracked doing everything else. It was an epic 100 days, but I still had the goal of defeating all the bosses, so I committed to 200 days to try and conquer every single boss. Don't even worry about watching those first 100 days. This next 100 is plenty action-packed. But of course, if you want to check it out, I'd also appreciate that. Here we go. Day 101. I went into that last fight with a death sentence. I cannot believe I had a total brain fart and tried defeating him with water moves. After that moronic strategy, I went straight to my pal box to look into what ice types and ground type pals I had, so that I could take him on with the proper element advantage. But unfortunately, Cebulix was my only decent ice or ground type, so I went ahead and pumped her up with some pal souls. Had I used her in the fight earlier on, I might have even beaten it. But time was already low when I finally called on her, so hopefully next time, if I start with her and she is boosted, it won't be an issue. However, it'll be a little bit before I return to the fight. After being humbled, I needed to recover mentally, and I had a lot of repairs and upgrades. My weapons needed repairs, and I also wanted to craft the pump action shotgun, so I farmed up some high quality pal oils to make polymer, starting with my own by butchering them. I'm sorry for this. I was tapped out though, so it took some time to gather a bunch of resources. Now that I was beyond 100 days, things slowed down a bit for me. I wasn't trying to rush my way right into the next boss fight because there is still so much to explore and discover. And I wanted to take it all in. I had a couple things at the forefront. First, I wanted to get more into breeding, and I had my sights on a couple rare pals that I wanted to get from breeding. So I got to crafting some cakes. But cakes aren't the only foods I got into. I finally started noticing the benefits of the different foods. At first, I thought it was all just different options that kept you full. But these foods actually provide benefits like reducing SAN, increasing attack, and increasing defense. And so I was all about exploring the different benefits of these foods. Since I already had all my pal souls pumped into my pals, I headed out to search for more, but I honestly didn't know the best way to do that. Certain pals dropped them like Daydream, but I killed like 20 of them and I got one, so that wasn't worth it. Even this cave boss Daydream didn't drop a single one. The only other method was to fly around finding them lying on the ground or getting them from these chests. Super grindy, but these pal souls are really effective. Even though you can reset them, you still need a bunch to max out your squad. So I did the grind, and since I was still trying to get myself to level 50, I caught everything I could for that XP boost. Also, a day out in the wild means a lot more eggs to collect. Things are starting to get expensive. My metal farm can barely keep up. It's really the pal metal that drains me. It required 4 ore and my metal farm isn't producing it fast enough. So I regularly will take a bit of time to grind some ore myself. I put my bronze cherry in my inventory to boost my weight, and then I go to town at different metal rich spots to boost my metal production. And that is what I did today. Finally, after a decent amount of grinding, I got the pal metal I needed to upgrade my armor. The boss fights are only going to get harder, and since I struggled with this last one, keeping my stuff fully upgraded will be essential. I was ready to finally get back on the horse and continue my quest. I headed out to the volcano and into a lava cave for the first time. Most of these other caves have been very similar, like basically identical, and so I haven't really bothered going in them very much. The cave bosses weren't very high level or very difficult either. But that's probably because I've been going in the easy caves. These volcano caves, however, were much tougher, especially because the lava inside can actually kill you. But I got to that giant Lee Spunk at the end, and I took him on. He was actually kind of tough and doing a bunch of damage, but I had my Fenglope to give me an advantage, and his low health pool made him somewhat easy to capture. At nighttime, I found myself some Blaze Howl Knocked. I hadn't seen many of these, and only had the 1 or 2, so I definitely wanted to capture these so that I could fuse their pal souls and boost the one I had in my party. My quest to take on all the bosses continued at the volcano. I entered Blazamut's cave to take him on. I had never even seen one of these out in the wild, so it was a must capture. But he was a level 49. I didn't have any level 49 pals, nor was my character even there. Blazamut was way more powerful than me. I knew if I was going to make this possible, I'd have to use my water moves. I started with Beacon and the Aqua Blast. Then tried getting another water ball shot off, but Blazamut did so much damage to him. I was depending on the strategy I used to get Fenglope. use this narrow cave to my advantage, blocking him with my pals and shooting him when I can. I cycled through my pals to see who could do the most work. My weapons were doing minimal damage, but minimal is better than no damage. I slowly drained his health, but he reset to the center. His health stayed low, so I just went in for the attack. I stuck to Fenglok because he was all water moves, and his mobility could potentially save my life. Except he got one shot, and Beacon was already down, so I was left to finish this fight on foot. I tossed out Suzaku. Fire against fire was no good, but I just needed him to be distracted. The health wasn't as low as you'd like, but I was worried about dying, so I just launched that sphere. And with RNG on my side, I got the Blasmate on the first toss. I was feeling real good about that one. He was instantly my highest level and likely strongest pal. I headed home to heal my injured pals up. I learned a cool trick where you don't need to wait the 10 minutes for them to be back on their feet. If you drop them in your base, a fellow pal will carry them to their bed and they will instantly be back. Their health stays low, but you can leave them there to heal. However, you don't need to wait 10 minutes to use them again. So I did that with Beacon so that we could go fly again. And once he was healed up, we went back out on the hunt for better pals. Specifically, I needed better water pals. I didn't have anything to compete with Blasma, and it made me realize my water pal deficiency. So I sought out what I figured is the strongest water pal, Jormungandr. I made sure to equip my Beacon with his lightning attacks, and we went after him. You get a nice lightning boost with your weapons from shooting off the back of Beacon, but I really didn't need it. Beacon's electric advantage was way more than enough to get the Jormungandr's health low enough for me to toss my spheres. Although Jormungandr was able to take down Beacon, I still got him though. During my 100 days, I spent a good portion grinding XP. The grind to reach level 50 is pretty rough. I had my sights set on capturing the Jetragon, but it felt like a waste unless I could actually ride it, which doesn't happen until level 50. So I went back out on the grind. I still had plenty of pals to tame up to 10 times to get that XP boost, but I also had a bunch of Liftmonk effigies to capture. I didn't know it at the time, but the capture rate was actually bugged. So collecting these Liftmonks was pointless for now. They ended up patching that, but through this playthrough they basically had no effect for me. I went right into the next day collecting as many as I could. I popped over and grabbed some metal by hand, and of course, all the eggs. I had a ton of stuff to craft back at base though. I was starting to feel the grind for that ammo. It gets quite expensive using the assault rifle, but thanks to my Super Anubis, crafting is so much faster. After loading up on more pals, I was once again running out of space, so I made my way over to the merchant to sell off my useless pals. It's honestly a bit hard to let them go, not because I was attached or anything, but because you can condense them and boost their stats. It felt like I was wasting skill points or something. Even if they are just workers, their work speed can be boosted with the pal condenser. So I didn't necessarily want to get rid of them, but I really needed the gold. But I also had a bunch of boss drops, and since they have literally just been sitting there doing nothing, I figured they must actually have no use, except for selling. So I sold them, and they brought in a ton of gold. I didn't even sell half of my stash, and I bagged a cool 60k. By the end of the day, I was able to level up to 49. Now, just one more level until I can get my hands on the Ferrari of pals. I went out to farm some things. I was looking for eggs, pal souls, and more pals. Since I still had that one level to go, I needed to hunt a few more of these. But I had been making my way through a lot of the easier ones, so I figured a good way to get a bunch of the pals was to grab the eggs. They are all over the place, and they have brought me some really good luck so far. A lot of the pals that I have came from eggs, some of which I haven't even seen out in the wild. Once I got back to base, I crafted some cakes, because I was wanting to breed a few more of the rare pals like the Grizzbolts, who I have only seen in that first boss fight. But I went right back out the next day while it was still dark to finish off my collection of effigies. About midday, I finally got there. It did get a bit grindy there at the end though. After having collected so many, they started to get a bit sparse and hard to find. I'm just glad they didn't make it where you literally had to collect them all to get the boost, because that would be awful. And speaking of the boost, it still didn't benefit me here, so pretty much a waste of time. Oh well. And the whole point of gathering them was to make capturing a legendary easier. So as soon as I did max it out, I got my gear ready and I headed up north to capture myself Frostallion. the legendary Steed of Ice. I didn't really know what to expect. I hadn't taken on any legendaries yet, but as soon as I saw its health pool, I knew I might have a problem. I equipped my pal with fire moves and brought a few fire pals with me because fire beats ice. I started with Beacon's Fire Tornado, and it did virtually nothing. Frostallion froze me. It was a move I knew I'd have to be cautious of. My weapons were also pretty useless against Frostallion, and once it hit me, it dropped my health more than halfway. Without my shield, I cannot take more than 2 hits. This thing is wrecking me, and I've barely even touched this thing. It is gonna be an epic fight. I tossed out my Suzaku, a level 44 fire, but his first attacks also did nothing. A fire against ice type and doing 1 per hit. This was bad. I flew up high and away to recover health and rethink my strategy. Frostallion was way stronger than I anticipated. Maybe if it had a normal health pool, but there was no way I was dropping this thing 14,000 health when I was doing such minimal damage. So I went back to re-strategize. Unfortunately, I already had my best fire pals on me and my best fire moves on them, so I couldn't really get better pals to fight. I was just going to have to use what I had and be smart about it. But I did take a minute to craft some ammo. Even though it was doing minimal damage, there's no timer in this fight, so I might as well just shoot him slowly from a distance and take my time. I headed back up into the north to face off against Frostallion once again. I tossed out my trusty Incineram, but it was really more of a distraction. I stood up on the ledge and unloaded my shotgun. The damage was minimal, but as long as I could stay safe and keep him distracted, I think I could do it. Blaze Howl was up next. His damage output wasn't any better, and his moves were really slow, which let Frostallion come after me. So I had to call him back, and I tossed out my untested Fire Beast, Blazamut. But even he, my strongest pal and a level 49, was still struggling to do a lot of damage. Yet Frostallion was chewing through him. I ran around just trying to stay alive, making sure my shield was fully charged at all times. I tried to manage Blaz by calling him back for protection, and I used Suzaku to keep Frostallion distracted, while trying to slowly drain his health little by little. Suzaku actually started to put in some good work, and his fire attacks were starting to make a dent in Frostallion's health, down to 7,000. I started to feel confident that I could get this done. I tossed out Beacon to let Suzaku heal back up, and to keep Frostallion distracted while I popped off shots from a safe distance. Incineram had his full health still, so I tossed him out to get some work in. Then, back to Blaze Howl, who had some health recovered by now. But both of them went down, so Suzaku was back up. And just a few seconds later, Frostallion took him down. Beacon was back up, but the damage from him is so minimal. I climbed up to a safe distance and tossed out my best pal for the job, the only one who could do real damage, Blazamut. He went hard after Frostallion, chasing her down and bullying her into a corner. In fact, he knocked her so hard, she went right into the wall, and she was sacked. So I took advantage of it. Blazamut did well enough to get her health down to around 4,000. It would have been a close battle to the end had I let the two just duke it out there, but I wasn't about to care about that because I just really wanted this legendary Frostallion. So I patiently attacked with my weapons and Beacon, and I took advantage of the situation. When her health was low, I tossed out my sphere. The one sphere didn't work, and then she became unstuck. Luckily, though, before she even got another attack in, I crept up on her and tossed a couple more, and I eventually got her. Yes, let's go! That was an epic 20-minute battle, and I needed to cool down after that. So I headed home, I tidied some things up at my base, and that was the day. And what a day it was. So I was still really happy with Beacon, but there was no way I wasn't going to try my new legendary flyer. First thing I did was grind the materials I needed, mostly the metal. It takes 200 refined ingots, which I think is the most expensive thing I have crafted yet. I assigned my Super Anubis to the task, and it still took a minute. But once I got it, I instantly fell in love. It was definitely faster than Beacon, which was nice, but its stamina pool was huge. I could fly much further, and honestly, it just looks so cool. I can say right now, this is undoubtedly my favorite PAL in the game. But it probably didn't become that until I actually started using it in battle. Before I took her into any fights though, I had some breeding to do. I learned how to get myself the dark version of the Frost Alien, the Frost Alien Noct. And that just sounded awesome, so I bred my Frost Alien with a Hell Zephyr. While they were getting busy, I had a raid. Wait a minute, what? What are they doing? What? No, what? What is happening? Oh my god, are you serious? Are you serious? They literally just bypassed that whole base too. Oh my god, that's hilarious. What? Okay then. It was hilarious. I got about 5 eggs to give me some variety with the hatching to see which one could be best. Then I swapped them out for 2 other pals. I had 2 breeding pens, but my cakes were running low. I put Mossanda and a Rayhound together so that I could get myself a Grisbolt. I hadn't seen these in the wild at all either, but it's like the cover art for the game, holding a giant minigun, so I definitely wanted to see what this guy was all about. There were some others I had interest in breeding, but I figured I'd hold off for now so I don't have to cook more cakes. I added more incubators though and called it a day. So it turns out they were able to get in because the walls actually deteriorated. I didn't know it at the time, but if you build outside the blue circle, your walls will deteriorate unless you change the setting, which I eventually did, but not before another group got into my base and set fire. But before I let it destroy my entire base with my eggs incubating in all, I made some quick moves and just destroyed the pieces with fire. Luckily, that worked really well, and then I just had to rebuild them, but a lot better than having to rebuild my entire structure. I can't believe after all this time, this was my first fire. And then I got my walls set up properly. I headed over to gather up more metal once again. My metal farm at this point was pretty optimized. I had a bunch of the Reptyros working, and with their level 3 mining, they are crushing this ore pretty quickly. And then I headed out farming Mammoris for the PAL oil. Mostly I just wanted to test out my new Ice Queen. And damn, she was strong. I headed to the volcano to scoop some sulfur up quickly. Up to now, I hadn't really needed all that much, so farming it here and there was fine. But as I crafted more and more bullets for that assault rifle, the sulfur grind was more and more needed. Fortunately though, this convenient spot right near one of the towers had pretty much all I needed. It was a quick, fast travel location, and I could scoop up what I needed, fast travel back. It worked really well for quick sulfur runs. And I was going to need a lot of gunpowder, because I recently just came across this gem. A rare assault rifle. The base assault rifle did a ton of damage already, so I was excited to see what this bad boy could do. But the thing is, I didn't even know where I got this. I think you can get these from the Blasmut fight, but when I went back and checked, I didn't get it from that. And I don't know if I got it from a chest or where I got it from. But after browsing through all my loot, I just happened to notice that I had it. So now it was a priority to craft it. And even with my Super Anubis, it still took some time. While it was crafting, I went back out to capture more pals. I was still looking to get that XP because I had planned on going after Chetragon next, and I wanted to have his saddle first. The rest of the day was just about replenishing my metal reserves after that expensive assault rifle. My Frost Alien Noct were finished. I hatched the eggs and checked their stats. I got a decent one, at least one I was happy with, so I didn't bother cooking up anymore. But before I even tossed it out, I wanted to craft its saddle, so I set out to get the things I needed. Honestly, not sure how I didn't toss it out right away just to admire it, but I guess it's kind of like having a Ferrari you can't drive, so I wanted to wait till I got the keys. My Grisbolts also hatched. I only bred a couple of those because I figured I wasn't going to min-max these guys. I just wanted to try one. I continued hunting down pal, souls, and other resources I needed. I found it easiest to fly around these 2 islands. They seemed to have a bunch of regular chests, which had the small pal souls, the ones I was looking for. When I got back to base, I had some upgrades to do. It was time to let Fenglope go. He was no longer fit to be on my squad, sadly, so I had to strip his souls from him and redistribute. He'd been a great fighter and a great mount, but I have outgrown him and it was just time to move on. It was pretty expensive though, so I had to make another trip to the merchant to sell off my goods and my useless pals. While out again searching for more pal souls, I ran into a black marketeer, and I figured I'd see what goods he has. But this dude was trying to peddle me Cativas and Gumas. These are not special pals at all. Only my second time to one of these guys and they continue to be useless. My man needs better selections. I was planning on just leaving him be, but a rush roar attacked us. And the black marketeer busted out a giant freaking minigun. Once he started shooting at my Ice Queen, it was on. Alright then, let's go. Yes, that's what you get, man. Don't mess with the Ice Queen. He was no match, but he did drop 13,000 gold. Next time I see one of these guys, I'm just shooting first. I was getting closer and closer to that level 50, so the rest of the day was just a bunch of capturing pals and farming resources. So somehow I hadn't even tossed out my Frost Alien knock to admire it yet. I literally got so distracted running around doing the things that make this game so addicting, so I kind of forgot about it. But while out, I just had a random moment. I was like, hey, I need to check this thing out. So I tossed it out and then admired its beauty, but then right back on the hunt for pals. When I got back to base, I started prepping for the next tower boss. After plenty of time off and time to power up, I felt really confident about this fight. But first I had to make sure my squad was properly equipped. Using water attacks on the electric type was definitely a huge mistake last time, and I wasn't about to go in unprepared again. So my whole squad got equipped with some ice attacks. Orsurk is a electric and dragon type. Since I don't have any good ground pals to take advantage of his electric, ice was the way to go, because it has that advantage over dragon types. And also, I used the souls I had to boost my team. Mostly Frost Alien, because no one even came close to her. And I was ready. I didn't even bother wasting time with other pals. I tossed out my hands down best pal. Damn! She just did 10k damage in one hit. Any nerves I had about beating this fight just went out the window. My Ice Queen was about to destroy this fool. Oh, he's got no chance. Get wrecked. Yay! I melted this dude. The damage was insane. I hopped off Frost Alien and just let her do her thing while I just sat back and watched the magic. That fight was night and day compared to last time. Sure, having the appropriate type helped, but really it was all Ice Queen. Even if she wasn't an ice type, she would have melted that dude. She is the best. I was feeling really confident at this point. I immediately set my sights on the next boss. I looked ahead and saw that it was a fire type. Since my water pals are still lacking a bit, I headed out to tame another Yormantide. I figured having 2 of these would be safe since I have literally no other water pals who are anywhere near high enough level to be on my squad. Again, my Ice Queen just made this a quick and easy process though. Just before the day's end, I finally got the last few pals I needed to get myself up to level 50. I started the preparations for the next fight. I went through all my skills and equipped my strongest pals with water moves, including Frost Alien, and I boosted Yormantide with Pal Souls. I also got the Pal Cold Metal Armor crafted and a few more bullets, and I was ready. Marcus and Phalaris. I started the fight with none other than my queen. She wasn't doing nearly as much damage as the last fight, but it still was pretty major. I sat back and let her do her thing while I blasted it with my weapons. I had a ton of shotgun ammo, and since assault rifle ammo is so expensive, I focused on using that. I was doing pretty good damage, so I wasn't too worried about time. 1 minute into the fight, we already had this thing dropped by like 40,000 health. Ice Queen was taking a good bit of damage though. Her health was already halfway down, but I kept her out and she kept fighting. Phalaris' health was getting lower, I called out my water pal Yormintide to see what he could do, and he was so big that he got caught a couple times on the pillars. But his Aqua Blast does massive damage. He brought it down to just under 1,000, and I finished them off with my shotgun. It was definitely a more challenging fight than the last one, but still no match for my squad. And after beaming with confidence, I set out to the volcano to hunt down the legendary Celestial Dragon. Another dragon type, so I was confident my Ice Queen would have no problems. But after a few hits, I realized how much defense this thing has, and this was not going to be as easy as I thought. His attacks were relentless, and they hit so hard. I flew around on Frost Alien trying to regen my shield and just avoid those hits. I let Ice Queen fight him while I just tried staying alive, getting in those shotgun blasts when I could. But he was relentless at coming after me. I continued to hop on Ice Queen and just let my shield recharge. Unlike the tower fights, this has no timer. I knew I was going to have to be patient if I was going to do this. My queen was doing her thing, but her health was getting low. I didn't want to lose her, or I'd have no flying mount and no way to escape his attacks. So I called her back and I let Blazimuth do some work. But just enough so that Ice Queen could heal up. I tossed her back out, hopped aboard, and went to town with that last 2k health. I was getting way too aggressive though, and he almost killed me. I had to fly circles around him very patiently, waiting for my shield to recharge, or he'd one-shot me. But once I got that shield recharged, I tossed that first sphere, and now it was just a game of how many spheres is it gonna take. I had 30 spheres on me, but at this point that capture power boost had no effect, so it was still gonna be rough. I tossed sphere after sphere after sphere, and I started to get hopeless. But finally, after about 15 or so spheres, I got him. Yes! Woo! Jetragon, let's go! I was so hyped to use this thing, I had very few technology points left, and I had intended on saving them specifically for this saddle. So I unlocked it right away, and I began the grind for the resources needed to craft it. This was also very expensive, a lot of metal, and a lot of circuit boards. The metal I got no problem, but those circuit boards required some work. Not something I really crafted a ton of this far, and I didn't have a super efficient method to do so. It was back to Mammoris farming for high-quality pale oils to make poly, and a trip up north to farm quartz. And after almost 2 full days of farming, I finally got to crafting. I put Anubis on the job and just waited patiently. As soon as I got that saddle crafted up, I took flight. And wow. I mean, wow, this dude is fast. I knew it was the fastest, but I had no idea. This thing is an actual jet. I mean, I totally get why they named it Jetragon or Jet Dragon. It's kind of a cool name, not gonna lie, I like it. I flew around, I just enjoying its speed for a while. It's quite fun to just cruise around on. And then I also tested out some of its decks. I was pretty excited to see what this thing could do in the next boss fight. My gold reserves were down to 0 and my pal box was filling up, so I headed back over to my merchant for sales. I had a ton of pals, enough to rake in almost 100k. Then after crafting the Jetragon saddle, my metal reserves were tapped, so I spent some time replenishing that stock. And also repairing my weapons, armor, and crafting more ammo. After those pretty resource-heavy fights, I needed some time to restock. I had just one more alpha pal to capture out in the volcano. I made my way to Asagon's cave and I entered for a fight. Another pal I hadn't seen yet, but I heard these guys are a level 4 miner, so he was a must get. And who else would I call on to fight other than Ice Queen? The first hit did a ton of damage, and then the second did as much. I actually had to switch off Frost Alien because I was afraid I'd kill him. So I tossed out good old Fanglope, a distraction while I could slowly drain his health a bit more with my rifle. I tossed my sphere when he was low, and when he broke out, he went into the ceiling. Well, I figured I'd have to let him respawn, so I grabbed the chest and was about to head out, but he appeared out of nowhere and with still low health. So I just had to toss another sphere and I captured him just like that. There were a few more alphas on the map I had encountered, but honestly some of them weren't even worth my time, like Gumas. He'd basically be a one-shot with Frost Alien and I didn't need his parts, so I didn't really feel the need to go after him. But there were still a couple I did want to face off against, just because I hadn't even seen them in the wild, and so I headed to Lunaris's dungeon. She was a much lower level, so I used Fanglope because Frost Alien probably would have killed her, but even Fang was still much stronger, so it was a quick and easy fight and a quick capture. I hadn't been up into the northern desert all that much yet, but I knew there were a couple legendaries up there. So now that every other alpha seemed to be an easy fight, it was time to challenge my squad again with these legendaries. I headed way up north and faced off against the Dark Knight of Legend, Necromus, and the Holy Knight of Legend, Palladius. I didn't have any really good dark pals to face off against Palladius, but Jetragon is dragon type, so he had an advantage over Necromus. And since he and Frost Alien are my strongest anyways, I started the fight with Jetragon. But when I launched my first attack, it did such little damage. This was my strongest pal to face off against these guys. This was gonna be brutal. I launched my rocket launcher hoping I'd do some serious damage, but that didn't do much either. It mostly just knocks them around for a half a second, but does little damage. My Beam Comet seemed to be the only move that did much damage at all, but even that was lacking. I flew around trying to just get shots off, but fighting two of them, they were relentless. I hopped off to let Jetragon do his thing on his own. He was able to make a small dent in Necromus, but I had to hop aboard to let my shield recharge. Being on foot was just too dangerous with their charge attacks. Jetragon's health was dropping, and I couldn't afford to lose him completely, so I called on Ice Queen. Her freeze charge attack is super helpful. Freezing them both in place gives me a chance to breathe. I hopped off my queen to let her do her thing on her own, and she was slowly getting it done. But when I got hit by Palladius, I needed to hop back on to recharge my shield, and because I was impatient, I went in for an attack. But Necromus's charge destroyed Frost Alien. I called Jetragon back out and his health was nearly full, but just one blast from Palladius wrecked him back to half. I was trying to hop aboard, but I got blindsided by both their charge attacks, and they destroyed me. I quickly flew out to grab my stuff, but that fight was way harder than I expected. So before I went back at it, I was going to need to rethink my approach, or at the very least, boost my squad a bit. The problem was I didn't have much for dragon or dark types to take them on. My best dragon was Jetragon, who still struggled against them, and the only dark type I had wasn't anywhere near high enough level. It was Astagon, who I just got. He was also a dragon type though, so I figured he'd probably be my best bet to take them both on. I reformed my squad and I redistributed some of the PAL souls. I gave the most to Jetragon and Astagon, since they are best suited for the element type I was facing. I also took the time to pump up my new team with dark and dragon attacks. I had a ton of them sitting in my storage, and very few of my pals actually had these attack types. After re-prepping, I headed back up north for round 2. I unleashed my missiles and then hopped off Jetragon to let him go to work. His boosted attack definitely was noticeable, and he was doing a decent bit of damage. I tossed out Astagon to see what he could do. Even though he had an advantage over both these types, he wasn't doing all that much. His defense was too weak, and their attacks were destroying him. Before he could even do all that much, I had to call him back. I tossed out Yormintide to see if it could do any better. But with no dark type, he was doing 1 damage against Palladius. They got me with the freeze attack, and then finished me off with the charge. Another disappointing defeat. I had barely even gotten their health down this time. I didn't use much ammo and my armor didn't need much repairing, but also I already was using my best team. So I quickly healed my pals, and then I went right back for round 3. This time my focus was to take down Necromus first. Since I had multiple dragon types, he was the weaker one for my squad. I was able to separate the two and fight Necromus 1v1 for a short bit. Eventually, Palladius joined the fight, but Necromus was already near halfway. I called on Ice Queen, so Jetragon could heal, and I carefully took on the two at once. I struggled to get them separated again, so I just went after them both. I cycled through a few of my pals to do as much damage as they could while my others healed up. Blasphemous was actually doing some decent damage, but most importantly, he held them off while my others could heal. I called on Yormintide next, but he seriously struggled to even get a single hit in. The two were just way too outmatched, even for his dragon type. So I went back to Astagon, but he just felt so slow with his attacks, taking way more damage than he was putting out. I knew I'd just be better off sticking with Ice Queen and Jetragon. As Necromus's health got lower and lower, I tried attacking him, but Palladius was relentless, and I had to focus on him for a little. As his health slowly got lower and lower, eventually I made my move, but it took a lot of spheres. His health was too high. I needed to keep lowering it. Eventually, Palladius fell asleep mid-fight. This was my window of opportunity to go 1v1 versus Necromus. I continued draining his health as much as I could, as fast as I could, and eventually I continued tossing those spheres. Palladius eventually rejoined the fight, but at this point, I had the advantage on Necromus and I continued to launch those spheres hoping to capture him. And after a lot more spheres, eventually, I got him. Now time for number 2. But my resources were really low. I had no more ammo, my weapons were damaged, my armor was low, and my pals were running low on health too. But Palladius still had half his health. I wanted to capture him, but it was more of a priority just to defeat him. First with Jetragon, then with Ice Queen. 1v1 was a lot easier, but he was still really tough, not taking much damage at all. I ended up switching Ice Queen moves back to her ice moves because she gets a bonus from using them with the legendary passive, and the dark moves just weren't doing all that much. And after a 20-minute epic fight, it was time to capture him. I brought back Jetragon to make sure he didn't accidentally finish him off. Blasphemous attacks are much weaker, so better for slowly draining his health. I had no ammo, so I couldn't do it with my weapons. I had only 10 spheres though, so I made sure to get his health as low as possible before capturing. I called Blasphemous back, but when his health was under 100, Blasphemous fire attacks continued to drain his health to 0. All that work for nothing. But that's okay. It was an epic fight and I'm glad to have at least defeated him. I knew I could always come back and capture him another day. Plus, his neutral type wasn't going to benefit me in the final boss. The final tower is actually a dark type, so I'd be at a disadvantage if I used him. Therefore, I had no intentions of bringing him into the fight, so it really wasn't that big of a deal that I couldn't capture him. After mowing down the last boss and capturing all the legendaries, I felt super confident going into the final tower. I was ready. My team was ready. Frostallion, Jetragon, Necromus, Blasphemous, and Yormintide. And I made sure to equip them with their best moves for the fight. I started with Jetragon. His attacks were doing significant damage. I knew he was going to have to be the one to carry the fight, but Shadowbeak was also doing massive damage to him. I knew I'd have to manage his health and be careful. I started lighting him up with my rifle, and the damage was nice. I called back Jetragon to make sure I could keep his health full, and I wanted to see what Ice Queen could do. She's not a dragon type, so she wasn't as effective against his dark pal, but she did okay. I called on Necromus to see what he could do. But another dark against dark was a no-go. Plus, he didn't have any souls pumped into him, so he wasn't going to cut it. I called out Blasphemous to see if he was any better, but the damage was minimal for him as well. All this time, the clock was ticking, and the only one to do serious damage was Jetragon. I called him back out and launched my attacks. I continued draining his health and swapping out my pals when Jetragon's health was low. At the halfway point, his health was still well above halfway. I knew I'd have to increase my damage output if I was going to finish this fight. But I was spending a lot of time running from the attacks, trying to let my shield heal, and then letting Jetragon heal as well. All that time, I wasn't putting in damage, and the clock got lower and lower. At the 1 minute mark, he still had over 70,000 health, and I knew this wasn't likely. But I pushed it till the end, seeing how much damage I could do. If anything, it would be a gauge for me to figure out where to go from here, and how much more damage I would need to do the next time. And when the clock hit 0, I timed out. My god, I wasn't even close. Back at base, I had some serious re-strategizing. I needed to come up with a way to do a whole lot more damage. I knew Jetragon was the only one who could really compete in that fight. So my first idea was to max out his souls. But I'd have to strip them from another pal, and I needed gold to do that. I headed to the merchant to sell off my useless junk. I stripped Astagon of his souls because he was pretty useless, and then I dumped everything I had into Jetragon, boosting his attacks, defense, and max HP. I knew I'd need every advantage I could get to win this fight. Another way to easily boost my attack and defense was to use food. I had been using marinated mushrooms for a 10% defense boost, but I hadn't had any of the attack boosts. My defenses seemed fine since I survived, but getting that attack up was going to be essential. So I headed out to hunt down the easiest meat to cook for a 10% boost in attack, the rush roar. And also some lamb ball to make herb roasted lamb ball, which gives 10% boost in defense. Then the grind to repair all my stuff and craft more bullets was underway. Since my assault rifle was so powerful, I knew I'd need a ton of bullets for it. It chews them up, but man, it's effective. My goal was to get 1,000 assault rifle rounds to take into the fight, but that was going to require some serious grinding, so that's what I did. I went through all my stash to see what else I could use to help me in the fight. I had this pendant I'd collected from I don't even know where, but I figured they'd be good boosts. A level 1 attack pendant and level 2 defense pendant. I tossed them both in my inventory because I figured I could just swap them out as I needed during the fight. But even better than that, I had this defense ring against dark attacks. This was gonna be huge. My defense was okay, but having this on would allow me to take more damage, which means I can dish out more damage faster without having to hide and heal. So it was definitely coming in to the fight with me. And once I was ready, I went back at it. Round 2. I let Jetragon do his thing right off the bat. Last time I wasted so much time swapping out my less effective pals. I knew this time it was all about Jet. I was only going to pull him to heal when he needed it. Just 1 minute in, we already had almost 30k health down. We were well on track to defeat him. I just had to keep being aggressive. I noticed it early on, but never really needed to use this as a strategy. But if you launch your attacks while riding and then hop off, he'll do his attacks again without them needing to recharge. I tried using that to my advantage to max out my DPS. Jetragon's health was getting low. I absolutely could not lose him, so I tossed out Yormantide while he healed. I boosted him, and his dragon attacks could put out some decent damage against this dark type. Halfway into the fight, and we were well below halfway, still on track to get it done. My health was low, and I needed to heal. But instead of running to safety, I tried using the pillars for cover. It's worked in the past, but Shadowbeak had a move that went right through it, and it annihilated me. It was a quicker fight than last time, so I didn't use too much ammo, but I still needed to grind more resources to craft even more of it, so back to the metal farm. And after another day of crafting, I was ready for round 3. I had my ammo stacked well over 1,000 rounds. My pals were boosted as much as they could be. My character was boosted as much as I could have it be. At least that's what I thought at the time. But I was ready. This was it. If I didn't get it done this time, I'd have to do some serious re-strategizing. I tossed out Jet, used his moves, then hopped off so he could launch them right away again. I kept a close eye on time to make sure damage was keeping pace. 1/4 health gone, 1/4 time gone. We were on pace. But Jetragon's health started to get low, so I had to call him back. I let Frost Alien do some work while he healed. Her damage just isn't as good, so I made sure to unload my assault rifle to get as much as I could done possible, going for those headshots. The clock was ticking, and I was losing pace. I had to call back on Jetragon even though he hadn't healed up that much. Going back and forth between riding him and letting him do his thing while I fired my assault rifle and I avoided the attacks. I raced against the clock, being as relentless as I could, taking only seconds off to heal my shield. But with such an aggressive strategy, I lost sight of Jet's health and he was taken down. I was still on pace for time, but I was worried not having my strongest pal was going to be a problem. Yormintide was up, but my main hope was my assault rifle. However, I was running low on ammo, over 1,000 rounds. I couldn't believe it, but that just made me reserve it even more. I should have burned through it as quick as I could. When Yormintide wasn't doing the damage that I needed, I went back to Ice Queen. 1 minute to go, 20,000 health. I dropped almost 30 in the first minute. I can do this. And as that clock got closer and closer, and my bullets basically gone, I realized I was gonna fall just short of getting it done. And that's exactly what happened. Well, that sucked. Not gonna lie, I was pretty defeated mentally. I had really high hopes that I was gonna be able to take him down after all that prep work, but also I wasn't sure where to go next to power up. My pals were already maxed out, and farming souls was a tedious grind that I wanted nothing to do with. The other option was to find a better weapon, but that was another grind that I was not at all interested in doing. I don't even know where I got my assault rifle, so I had no interest in hunting a better one down. I thought about maybe respeccing my character and boosting the damage, but really it wasn't me that was doing the bulk of the work. It was Jetragon. So ultimately I figured the best strategy to get more damage done was to capture myself another one. He was the only one who could put out major damage, and the downfall of that fight was letting him get killed. Had he stayed in that fight, I definitely would have got there. There was only 10k of the 200 left. But after he was defeated, I just wasn't able to put out enough damage. So at some point before going back into that fight, I knew I'd have to get myself another one. However, I needed a break, and I wanted to do a couple other things first. Besides, I needed a ton of resources since I burned through all my ammo, and that's what I started with today. I also had a bunch of souls dumped into Blasmut, but the only reason I didn't remove them before because it was going to cost 100k gold, and I didn't have it. But after a bit of farming, I did. So I reset his stats to get a boatload more souls to dump into Jetragon. I fell back into a comfy routine of managing my base, crafting more resources that I may or may not use, and replenishing a bunch of things that were getting low. My technology points had been low for some time, so I wasn't able to unlock some of the things I wanted to use, but I figured I could do that with the Mind Wipe potion. But I still needed to craft an electric medicine bench. Once I did, I saw that the memory wipe was ridiculously expensive. The parts were all farmable, but 100 flowers? The 10 I had was all that I had collected in this entire 136 days. The other items I could get either from a merchant or some quick farming, but still nothing else you craft I felt used anywhere near this much, so it seemed super expensive. Before I started farming those resources, I wanted to craft some medicine. My poor pals had been getting sick and injured, and I hadn't one single time tried to heal them up. I didn't even know how the medicine worked, so I went ahead and gave it a shot. Pun intended. Specifically, it was my Yormintide Ignis. Most other pals were replaceable, but I didn't have any more of him, and he was essential for cooking metal. And now that he was back to full strength, I farmed up a bunch of metal and spent half the day doing so. There were a few more alpha pals I had some interest in going after. Anubis is one I was way too outmatched last time I encountered him, but I definitely powered up quite a bit and I was ready to capture myself and Anubis. I flew out to the desert and took him on. His defenses are pretty solid. He can also speed dodge your attacks, which is crazy. But as I expected, my legendary pals and myself were much too strong for him, and I captured a giant Anubis. I spent a bit of time starting to grind out some of those resources for the mind-wiping medicine, and then I headed over toward Yormintide. My thought was it would be good to have another dragon-type pal I could bring into the fight. I still planned on getting another Jetragon, but if I had 4 dragon types, 2 Jetragons and 2 Yormuntides, I'd have a better chance at getting that damage output if the 2 Jetragons go down. It's an easy takedown for my pal, so I went after him quickly and I captured another. I geared up and I went out to the volcano to get Jetragon number 2. I let Ice Queen go at him first. She was boosted with souls compared to the last time we fought. But that didn't mean much. The Jetragon is still a monster. I couldn't just let her brute force the fight. We had to be strategic. But I was a little overconfident and I lost focus for just a second, which was long enough for him to get off an attack on me, and it destroyed me. So I went right back out there, this time with my Jetragon, and I let them duke it out. My guy had the upper hand and was winning the fight, but the wild one was relentless and coming after me. I had to continually hop on my Ice Queen to fly around to recharge my shield. It was a little buggy trying to hop on my Jetragon, so I relied on the Ice Queen. And since his health was low enough, I just used Ice Queen to finish the job. While over in that direction, I headed to one of the wildlife sanctuaries. I hadn't been over here much, and I was curious to see what rare pals I could find. Immediately, I saw 2 really needed things. 1, the rare flower things. I needed 100 of them, and they spawned all over out here. Talk about a well-timed discovery. I didn't even know which pal to farm these from, but now I can just collect 100 real quick out here. I also spotted the Yormuntide Ignis. I only saw the one that I had from an egg, and I didn't even know these things spawned over here, so I definitely collected myself a couple more. This was a random decision to come over here, but totally worth it. 2 really great finds. Now that I had 2 Jetragons, I needed to boost the other one with souls, and my new one was actually better, so I maxed out both of my Jets with as many pal souls as I could. And as the final preparations were slowly underway, I did another chunk of bullet farming. I actually used quite a few in that Jetragon fight, and this time I was planning on taking 2,000 with me into the final boss, because, well, I just wasn't going to have that be the reason I fail. The advanced version of crafting stations always provide better things to craft, so I wanted to see what better foods I could cook up. I built the advanced version of the cooking pot, and as I expected, there was a lot of new things to cook. But what I was interested in are these foods that give a 20% boost to attack and defense. I just had the mushroom soups before, which only did 10%, so that was awesome. Plus, I tested them out on my pals, and they do indeed work on your pals. I was so excited. I pretty much spent the rest of the day farming the types of meat that I would need to cook a bunch of these helpful meals. I put my chef's hat on and started cooking up a bunch of the foods. The one thing I didn't know of if the various types stacked, so is it possible to get like 40 or 60% boost? So I made a bunch of the different types, and I found out later that it doesn't stack, unfortunately. It just goes off the last one you eat. My tiny little cooler box was filling up with all the new food, so I had to upgrade. I had to farm up some of the ice organs first. I haven't really needed any of these for anything much, so I never really farmed them. But a quick trip up north got me what I needed. I found that farming bones for the mine wipe was a little tedious. I had the same issue early on when trying to produce a bunch of cement, so I went back to a merchant, which seems to be far and away the best method because they aren't that expensive. But I couldn't buy any pal fluids, so I had to farm those. I was close with my flowers, but I didn't have quite enough, so I headed back out to the wildlife sanctuary to grab some more. I needed to go to multiple though. They don't have quite as many as I need on each one. This other sanctuary was convenient because it had these Terra deer, which gave me that meat I was most looking for to craft those attack and defense boosting foods. So 2 birds with 1 stone by coming over here. I had been yearning to craft the Frost Alien Nox saddle just to give it a ride, but it was really expensive. So much metal. I had to take some legit time out just to grind the metal for it. But after Anubis finished crafting it, it was time to finally get to ride this legendary pal. It was unfortunate I didn't have much use for it. Certainly wasn't coming into the final fight because it's a dark type and well underpowered since I hatched it at level 1. But I loved having it. It looked so dope. And then I continued on with the final preparations. I was getting very close to being ready. I probably could have went ahead and started by now, but I was soaking in the last few days of my adventure. I had done so much already and accomplished all the side things I had intended to do. Once the tower boss was defeated, I knew that would probably be the end. So I really wanted to cherish every last bit and take my time. But also, I wanted to be over prepared. It still was not going to be easy after all my upgrades, and I wanted to make sure to give myself the absolute best chance. One of the alpha pals I did want to get, though, was Suzaku, so I headed into the northern desert to track him down. I really didn't know what to expect, but I figured he couldn't be stronger than Palladius and Necromus. When I got there, I just relied on my strongest to take him down, and he did so in seconds. At this point, my power level is pretty high, and these alpha pals, even the hardest of them, are really no match. I captured him and headed up toward the third wildlife sanctuary. I still needed more flowers, and I hadn't been up to this one yet. I didn't necessarily intend on it, but I figured, why not tame Palladius? Last time I only got one of the two, so let me challenge myself, especially after feeling so powerful compared to before. I jumped into the fight with Chetragon and started letting him have it. I was much stronger this time, and their damage fell pretty quickly. They were doing a good bit of damage though to my Chetragon, but I had a spare now. I tossed him out and let him go to work. I attempted to take out Necromus first so I could just fight 1 versus 1. Once he was down, I made my attacks to drop Palladius' health. Between my 2 legendary dragons, Ice Queen, and my rare assault rifle, this time around it was a much easier fight. Although, to be fair, it was still a bit of a challenge. The rest of the day I flew around grabbing a few more pal souls to get those last few boosts on my team before I went into that final fight. The end is near. The last major things I wanted to do required me to reset my technology points. So I spent the time needed to grind out the crazy amount of resources to get the mind wipe. And then I had to craft it. And oh my god, it has to be the slowest crafting thing in the game. I had my best medicine maker, Veilette, a level 3, but it was dragging on. I definitely wasn't about to sit and wait for it. The only problem is, if I just left a base pal there, how many times would they take a break, making it even longer? I had to put her in my party and just do stuff around my base, pretty much. I was trying to calculate how long it took. After about 10 minutes, it was a quarter of the way. So basically, this thing is a 40-minute craft. What? It was so slow, though, I had to try to boost that speed. So first I remembered the Witch's Cauldron, which I always figured would be useless since I don't make medicine like ever. But that will help the medicine crafting efficiency, so it should speed it up. But also I remembered some of the food can help boost speed. So I checked my cooking station, and I found some things that I can cook to help make that faster. At this point, it was about halfway, and the thing moved so slow that I couldn't actually tell if those things helped. But in her stats, it did show a boost to work speed, so that was comforting. And since I couldn't really leave my base since she was in my party, I pretty much just went AFK until it was done. I had another couple pals I wanted to get my hands on through breeding. I tossed Astagon and Kitsune together so they could make the Shadowbeak, and then a Vanworm and Anubis together to make a Phalaris. These were 2 of the boss pals I encountered in the towers, but never even seen them in the wild, so I definitely wanted to try them out. And I wanted to see how they fly, but I needed to unlock their saddles first. So I went ahead and drank my Mind Wipe potion. It resets my stats like I expected, but it did not reset my technology points. This was a huge disappointment. I really wanted to test out a bunch of these things that I hadn't unlocked, and I checked the settings to see if there was something to bypass this, but I didn't find anything. I don't know if there's cheats that I can get past this with either, and this was like the last big thing I wanted to do in the game. I was hoping to casually just unlock some things and try them out and take my time a little to enjoy the world a bit longer before I head into that final fight. But now I felt like I had nothing left to do. As disappointed as I was, it kind of gave me a good reason to do another playthrough, which could be fun if new content is slow to come. But that was it. I was ready. The time was here. I rebalanced my stats for better attack and more stamina after the mind wipe. My pals were fully upgraded, even more than before. I had 2 boosted Jetragons, my Frostallion, and I recently discovered the Gobfin gives you a passive attack boost. Since I didn't use those last 2 slots, I added them to my squad. I had almost 2,000 assault rifle rounds. I had a backup hyper shield. I had food that gave me and my pals a 20% boost for defense and a reduction in hunger so they didn't get hungry mid-fight. I was completely ready. If I couldn't beat this now, well, I was probably just gonna quit because I was absolutely maxed out with my team. Here we go. I wasted no time. I launched my missiles right away. Then I hopped off and let Jetragon fire again. I blasted him with my rifle. In just 30 seconds, we did 25,000 damage. But I had a strong start before. I had to keep the pressure on. Jetragon was annihilating him, and so was my assault rifle. He was doing work. At half health, I called him back for a short bit to let my backup get in the fight. I continued laying down endless bullets, going for those headshots. Hopping aboard Jetragon when his missile attacks were ready and unleashing the fury. I continued the pressure, never letting up. Both my Jetragons were unstoppably powerful, and my assault rifle was chewing through him. The health dropped faster and faster. I mounted Jetragon once again to finish him off with my missile launcher. Let's go! Woo! We did it! Yes! Fuck yeah! We got him! Let's go! Yes! There it was. I accomplished my goal. I stood atop the tower contemplating my next move. It was only day 150 of the 200, but my goal wasn't to survive 200 days, it was to defeat these bosses, and that is what I did. I felt complete. I captured all the pals I was interested in. I experienced the breeding. I explored most of, if not all, the map. The only thing I didn't get to do was experience some of the locked items. But I knew I'd be back one day, because as I stood out looking at this tree, I remembered the tree is supposed to hold the truth. So, when I can actually make it out there, one day, I will discover that truth. But until then, thank you so much for coming along this journey with me. I hope it brought you even just a fraction of the joy that it brought me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and I hope to see you on the next adventure.